Some doors should never be opened after midnight. Evelyn Harper learned that the night destiny knocked anyway. The wind rattled the loose shutters of her small cabin at the edge of Frost Hollow, carrying the sharp scent of pine and approaching snow through every crack in the weathered walls. The town slept beneath a blanket of darkness, but Evelyn was still awake, sitting beside the fading glow of a stone fireplace with a mending needle in her hand. The wool coat spread across her lap belonged to no one. It was another discarded item left outside her door by people who needed help but never wanted to be seen speaking to the town's forgotten Omega. Her fingers moved carefully through the fabric while the storm gathered strength beyond the window. The cold season always arrived early in Frost Hollow. By November, the forest surrounding the town looked like a world frozen in time, silent and distant beneath layers of white. Evelyn had grown used to the silence. She had grown used to many things. The whispers that followed her through town, the lowered voices when she entered a store, the pity hidden behind polite smiles. 22 years old and unmated, she was considered an unfortunate reminder of everything a young Omega should not become. Most days, she kept her eyes down and finished her errands quickly. It was easier that way, easier than pretending the stairs did not hurt. A sudden gust shook the cabin. The fire flickered. Evelyn glanced toward the window. Snow had begun falling heavily now, swirling through the darkness like pale ghosts dancing between the trees. Somewhere beyond the forest, a lone wolf howled. The sound echoed faintly across the hills before disappearing into the storm. She returned to her sewing, trying to ignore the strange unease creeping through her chest. Then she heard it. Scratch. Evelyn froze. The sound came from outside. Soft, weak, almost lost beneath the wind. She waited. The cabin fell silent again. Her grip tightened around the needle. Maybe it had only been a branch. Maybe the storm was playing tricks on her. Then it came again. Scratch. Scratch. This time it was unmistakable. Something was at her door. Her heart began to pound. Nobody visited her this late. Nobody visited her at all. Slowly, she set the coat aside and rose from her chair. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she crossed the room. Another scratching sound reached her ears, weaker than before. Not aggressive, not threatening, almost desperate. The firelight cast long shadows across the walls while the storm continued to rage outside. Evelyn stopped beside the door and listened. For several seconds, she heard nothing except the wind. Then came 3 faint taps. Tap, tap, tap. Her breath caught. Whoever, or whatever, stood outside sounded exhausted. Every sensible thought told her to leave the door closed. The forest beyond Frost Hollow was filled with dangers. Travelers knew better than to wander alone after dark. Yet something deep inside her refused to walk away. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was compassion. Or maybe it was the quiet voice she had always followed, the one that never let her ignore someone in need. Evelyn wrapped her hand around the iron latch. The metal felt ice-cold against her skin. For one final moment she hesitated. Then she slowly pulled the door open. A blast of freezing air rushed into the cabin. Snow swirled across the floorboards. And there, collapsed on her porch beneath the storm, lay the largest black wolf she had ever seen. For a moment, Evelyn forgot how to breathe. The wolf was enormous, larger than any she had ever seen in the forest surrounding Frost Hollow. Its black coat was dusted with snow, and its sides rose and fell in slow, uneven breaths. Even lying motionless on the porch, it carried a quiet presence that made the cold night feel strangely smaller around it. Evelyn's first instinct was to step back inside and lock the door. Every story she had ever heard warned against approaching an unknown wolf alone. Yet something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion she saw in its pale silver eyes. Maybe it was the simple fact that no creature should be left outside during a storm like this. The wolf looked at her only once before its head lowered again, as if it no longer had the strength to remain alert. Snow continued gathering along its back. Evelyn swallowed hard and stepped closer. The icy wind immediately bit through her sweater. From only a few feet away, she noticed details hidden by the darkness. The wolf's fur was tangled in places, and beneath the thick black coat, she could see signs of a difficult journey. Small patches of ice clung to its legs. A faint mark gleamed near one shoulder. Kneeling carefully, she brushed away a layer of snow and froze. Something metallic reflected the porch lantern's light. It was not a hunting trap, or anything she recognized from the town. It looked almost decorative, crafted with unusual precision. An emblem had been engraved into its surface, though snow and frost obscured most of the design. Evelyn frowned. What was something like that doing attached to a wild wolf? The question lingered in her mind. The animal shifted slightly and released a low sound that barely rose above the wind. Not a growl, not a warning. It sounded tired, deeply tired. Her heart tightened. She understood that feeling better than most. There had been days when simply getting through another morning felt heavier than carrying firewood through waist-deep snow. Slowly, she extended a hand. The wolf watched her movement, but made no attempt to pull away. Her fingers brushed the thick fur near its neck. Warm. Despite the freezing weather, it was still warm. Relief washed through her. Whatever had happened, the animal was alive. That was enough. Decision settled over her before she fully realized she had made it. She could not leave it here. Not tonight. Not in this storm. Evelyn stood and glanced toward the empty road. Frost Hollow was silent. Every window remained dark. No one would see. No one would ask questions. Taking a steadying breath, she opened the door wider and dragged an old quilt onto the porch. It took several attempts before she managed to guide part of the heavy animal onto the fabric. The wolf did not resist. If anything, it seemed to trust her. That realization sent an unexpected shiver through her chest. Together, inch by inch, they crossed the threshold. The fire crackled softly as warmth filled the cabin. Snow melted onto the wooden floor. The wolf finally lowered itself beside the hearth and closed its eyes. Evelyn stared at the mysterious creature resting in her home. Outside, the storm continued to howl through the darkness. Inside, for reasons she could not explain, she felt as though her quiet life had just changed forever. The storm showed no sign of weakening. Snow pressed against the cabin windows while shadows danced across the walls from the fire's golden light. Evelyn sat on a wooden stool beside the hearth, watching the sleeping wolf with growing concern. Up close, the creature seemed even more unusual than she had first realized. Most wolves carried a wild, restless energy, even when injured or exhausted. This one was different. There was something calm about it, something controlled, as though it belonged somewhere far beyond the forests surrounding Frost Hollow. She dipped a cloth into warm water and carefully brushed away more snow and dirt from its thick fur. The wolf remained still. Only the slow rise and fall of its chest assured her it was resting peacefully. As she worked, the strange metallic piece she had noticed earlier became easier to see. It was attached to a narrow leather strap hidden beneath the fur near its shoulder. Evelyn gently turned it toward the firelight. The emblem engraved on its surface looked like a crown surrounded by twisting branches. She frowned. The design felt familiar somehow. She had seen something similar years ago on a faded banner hanging outside the town hall during a royal holiday. The realization made her pause. Why would a wild wolf carry anything connected to the palace? The thought seemed impossible. She shook her head and focused on practical concerns instead. The animal needed warmth, rest, and food. Questions could wait until morning. Rising from her stool, she crossed the room and retrieved the last package of dried venison from her cupboard. It was supposed to last the remainder of the week. Food was expensive during winter, especially for someone living alone. For a moment she hesitated. Then she smiled sadly and carried the package back anyway. The wolf needed it more than she did. As soon as the scent reached the hearth, a pair of silver eyes slowly opened. Evelyn nearly jumped. The wolf was awake. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Firelight reflected inside those pale eyes, creating the illusion of tiny stars shining in the darkness. They were not frightening eyes. They were intelligent eyes, thoughtful eyes, the kind that made her feel as though she was being studied just as carefully as she studied it. Evelyn knelt and placed the food nearby. "You are lucky I have a soft heart," she whispered. The wolf blinked once. Then, to her surprise, it lowered its head slightly. The gesture almost looked like gratitude. She laughed quietly at herself. Exhaustion was clearly affecting her imagination. Wolves did not understand gratitude. Wolves did not carry royal emblems. Wolves certainly did not look at people as though they understood every word being spoken. Yet the strange feeling remained. Hours passed. The storm continued outside while the cabin settled into silence. Eventually, Evelyn spread a blanket across her chair and prepared to sleep near the fire. She could not bring herself to leave the animal alone. As she closed her eyes, she sensed movement. Looking up, she found the wolf watching her again. This time there was something different in its gaze. Not fear, not caution, recognition. The feeling lasted only a second before the wolf rested its head on its paws once more. Evelyn stared at the fire, unable to shake the strange warmth spreading through her chest. Somewhere beyond the storm, beyond the dark forests and frozen mountains, unseen events were already moving toward Frost Hollow. But inside the little cabin, neither she nor the mysterious wolf knew that by sunrise, everything would begin to change. Sleep came slowly. The storm had softened sometime before dawn, leaving only the occasional whisper of wind brushing against the cabin walls. Evelyn drifted through uneasy dreams filled with silver eyes and distant mountains she had never seen before. At first, the images felt scattered and meaningless. Then they began to sharpen. She stood in a vast stone hall illuminated by hundreds of lanterns. Tall banners hung from towering pillars, their dark fabric embroidered with the same crowned emblem she had discovered on the wolf's strange collar. Voices echoed through the chamber. Some sounded worried. Others sounded angry. Yet one voice rose above them all. Calm, strong, familiar. Evelyn turned toward the sound, but before she could see the speaker, the scene shifted. Snow covered everything. Endless white stretched across the landscape beneath a pale winter sky. A lone figure stood atop a ridge overlooking a distant kingdom. He wore a dark coat that moved in the wind, and although she could not see his face clearly, she felt an odd certainty that she knew him somehow. Not from memory, not from experience, from something deeper. The figure slowly turned. Just before she could make out his features, a sudden flash of light swept across the dream. Evelyn gasped and sat upright in her chair. The fire had burned low. Soft gray morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows. For a few seconds, she struggled to separate dream from reality. Then she remembered the wolf. Instantly, she looked toward the hearth. The enormous black wolf was awake. It remained lying beside the fire, but its silver eyes were open and alert, watching her, not with suspicion, not with fear, almost as though it had been waiting for her to wake. Evelyn pressed a hand against her chest. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been. The dream lingered in her thoughts with unusual clarity. Every detail felt strangely real. She shook her head and stood. "You are becoming a problem," she murmured softly. "A very confusing problem." The wolf tilted its head slightly. Again, the reaction felt almost human. Evelyn moved toward the kitchen area and began preparing breakfast. A few minutes later, she carried a bowl of water back to the hearth. As she knelt, she noticed something that made her pause. The animal looked stronger. Much stronger. The exhaustion she had seen the previous night had almost vanished. Even the stiffness in its movements appeared reduced. It was recovering remarkably fast. Her gaze drifted toward the engraved emblem once more. Curiosity finally overcame caution. Carefully, she reached for the leather strap. The wolf watched her but did not object. Gently turning the metal piece into the light, she brushed away the remaining frost. This time the symbol became fully visible. A crown surrounded by black branches. Beneath it were 3 small stars arranged in a triangular pattern. Evelyn stared. Recognition struck instantly. She had seen that exact crest before. Every citizen in the Northern Territories had. It belonged to the royal family. Her breath caught. For several seconds, she simply knelt there, unable to move. The royal crest, attached to a mysterious wolf that had appeared at her door during a blizzard. The realization should have felt impossible. Yet deep inside, she sensed that this discovery was only the beginning of a much larger mystery. And as the wolf continued watching her with those intelligent silver eyes, Evelyn could not shake the feeling that somewhere far beyond Frost Hollow, powerful people were already searching for what she had found. The discovery unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. All morning, Evelyn found herself glancing toward the wolf whenever she thought it was not looking. A royal crest was not something that appeared by accident. It belonged to the most powerful family in the Northern Territories. Ordinary people like her spent their entire lives without ever seeing a member of the royal court. Yet somehow, a mysterious wolf carrying the kingdom's symbol had arrived at her doorstep during a snowstorm. By late morning, sunlight reflected across the frozen landscape outside, turning the world beyond her cabin into a field of silver and white. The storm had passed completely. Frost Hollow slowly came back to life. Smoke rose from chimneys. Wagons creaked along distant roads. Somewhere in town, church bells announced the start of a new day. Inside the cabin, however, everything felt strangely suspended. Evelyn tried focusing on her chores. She swept the floor, repaired a loose cabinet hinge, organized firewood beside the hearth. Yet every few minutes her attention drifted back toward the black wolf. It remained calm throughout the day, resting quietly beside the fire. Occasionally, its silver eyes followed her movements through the room. Each time their gazes met, that strange feeling returned. Recognition. Familiarity. As though an invisible thread connected them. Shortly after noon, Evelyn prepared a simple meal. While she sat at the small wooden table, she noticed movement near the hearth. The wolf had risen to its feet. For the first time since arriving, it stood fully upright. Evelyn nearly dropped her spoon. The animal was magnificent, powerful without appearing threatening. Its black coat gleamed beneath the afternoon light streaming through the window. More surprising was how healthy it looked now. The exhaustion from the previous night had almost disappeared completely. Recovery should not have happened this quickly. It made no sense. The wolf crossed the room slowly and stopped beside the front door. Evelyn watched in silence. For several seconds it simply stood there, staring at the sunlight beyond the glass. Then it looked back at her. Something passed through those silver eyes. Gratitude. Farewell. The thought appeared so suddenly that she almost laughed at herself. Yet the feeling remained. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. You are leaving, aren't you? She asked softly. The wolf remained still. Then it lowered its head once. The gesture was so deliberate that Evelyn felt a chill travel down her spine. Before she could say another word, the animal turned and nudged the door with its nose. Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to stop it, to demand answers she knew it could never give. Instead, she crossed the room and opened the door. Cold winter air drifted inside. The wolf stepped into the sunlight. Snow sparkled beneath its paws. For a moment it paused at the edge of the porch and looked back one final time. Then it disappeared into the trees. Evelyn stood motionless long after it was gone. The forest swallowed every trace of its presence. Only silence remained. Eventually she returned inside. The cabin felt emptier now, too quiet. As she approached the hearth, something caught her eye. Resting on the floor where the wolf had slept was a ring. Silver. Elegant. Its surface carried the same royal crest she had discovered earlier. Evelyn slowly picked it up. The metal felt warm against her palm. And for reasons she could not explain, she suddenly knew. With absolute certainty that this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The following morning began like every other morning in Frost Hollow. Evelyn woke before sunrise, lit the fireplace, and stepped outside to collect fresh water from the pump near her cabin. The air was crisp and cold. A thin layer of frost covered the ground, sparkling beneath the pale morning light. For a brief moment, she almost convinced herself that the events of the previous 2 days had been nothing more than a strange dream. Then her fingers brushed against the silver ring resting inside her coat pocket. The memory returned instantly. The black wolf, the royal crest, the impossible feeling that her life had somehow become tangled with something far beyond her understanding. She returned inside and placed the ring carefully on the kitchen table. Sunlight reflected across its polished surface. The crowned emblem seemed even more striking during daylight. Evelyn stared at it while sipping tea. Questions filled her mind. Who had the ring belonged to? Why had the wolf left it behind? And most importantly, why had it appeared at her door in the first place? A sudden sound interrupted her thoughts. At first it was distant, faint, rhythmic. She frowned and moved toward the window. The sound came again. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Her stomach tightened. Frost Hollow rarely saw visitors. Large groups almost never traveled through the town, especially during winter. Curious, she stepped onto the porch. Across the valley, a line of riders emerged from the forest road. Sunlight flashed against polished armor. Dark horses moved in perfect formation. The sight immediately drew attention throughout town. Doors opened. Villagers stepped outside. Conversations died away. Everyone watched the approaching riders with growing unease. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Even from a distance, she could see the insignia displayed on their banners. A black crown surrounded by silver branches. The same symbol engraved on the ring sitting inside her cabin. the same symbol attached to the mysterious collar she had discovered on the wolf. Her breath caught. The riders entered town less than 10 minutes. Later, there were more than 20 of them. Their uniforms were immaculate. Their posture was disciplined. These were not merchants. They were not travelers. They were royal guards. The entire town seemed to hold its breath as the group stopped in the center square. Children fell silent. Shopkeepers abandoned their counters. Even Mayor Thomas Reed emerged from town hall, looking visibly nervous. The lead officer dismounted from his horse. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with quiet authority. His sharp gaze swept across the gathered crowd. "We are searching for someone," he announced. His voice carried easily through the square. A murmur spread among the townspeople. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The officer reached inside his coat and unfolded a small document. Then he looked up again. "We seek Evelyn Harper." Silence crashed over the square. Every head turned in the same direction, toward the small cabin at the edge of town, toward the forgotten Omega who suddenly felt every eye in Frost Hollow staring directly at her. And as the officer's gaze finally settled on her face, Evelyn realized with growing certainty that the mysterious wolf had never truly left her life behind. For several seconds, Evelyn could not move. The entire town seemed frozen around her. Dozens of familiar faces stared with open curiosity while the royal officer waited patiently in the center of the square. She could feel the weight of every gaze pressing against her. People who had barely spoken to her in years were suddenly watching as though she had become the most important person in Frost Hollow overnight. "I am Evelyn Harper," she finally said. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. The officer studied her carefully. Whatever he was looking for, he appeared to find it. His expression softened slightly. "Then we have found the correct person." Murmurs immediately spread through the crowd. Evelyn's stomach tightened. None of this felt real. Royal guards did not travel across the kingdom searching for forgotten Omegas. They certainly did not arrive in groups of 20. "Have I done something wrong?" she asked quietly. A few nearby townspeople exchanged nervous looks. The officer seemed surprised by the question. "Wrong," he repeated. "No, Miss Harper." Relief should have followed those words. Instead, her unease only deepened. If she was not in trouble, then why were they here? The officer stepped forward and removed a sealed document from his coat. The dark wax seal displayed the same royal crest she had already seen twice before. The sight sent a chill through her chest. "You are requested to accompany us immediately," he said. Requested, not ordered. Yet something about his tone made it clear that refusal was not truly expected. "Accompany you where?" Evelyn asked. "The royal palace." The square fell silent again. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Several villagers gasped openly. Mayor Reed looked as though he had forgotten how to breathe. The palace was nearly 300 miles away. Most citizens spent their entire lives hearing stories about it without ever seeing its gates. Evelyn stared at the officer, certain she had misunderstood. "There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake." His answer came without hesitation. "Transportation has been prepared. We are instructed to ensure your comfort throughout the journey." Comfort. The word only made the situation stranger. Questions filled her mind faster than she could speak them. Why her? Why now? What could the palace possibly want from someone like her? Before she could ask, another voice interrupted. "Evelyn." It was Mrs. Carter from the bakery. The older woman stepped forward carefully. "Is she safe?" The concern surprised Evelyn almost as much as everything else. The officer inclined his head respectfully. "Completely safe." His answer appeared sincere. Yet nobody seemed reassured. An hour later, after gathering a few belongings, Evelyn stood beside an elegant black carriage waiting at the edge of town. Frost Hollow had never looked smaller. Neighbors watched from porches and storefronts. Children whispered excitedly. Adults exchanged theories. Some looked jealous. Others looked worried. Evelyn only felt overwhelmed. As she climbed into the carriage, her hand slipped into her coat pocket. Her fingers closed around the silver ring. The metal remained warm. Despite the winter air, a strange sense of calm settled over her. The carriage door closed. Horses began moving. Slowly, Frost Hollow disappeared behind her. Snow-covered roads stretched toward distant mountains. The royal guards surrounded the carriage in perfect formation. No one offered explanations. No one answered her growing questions. And as the kingdom rolled past beyond the window, Evelyn could not shake the feeling that every mile carried her closer to the truth about the mysterious wolf who had changed everything. 3 days later, the palace finally appeared on the horizon. Evelyn had imagined it countless times during the journey, yet nothing prepared her for the reality. Towering stone walls rose above the snowy landscape like something from an ancient dream. Silver banners fluttered from high towers. Sunlight reflected from hundreds of windows, making the entire structure seem to glow against the winter sky. As the carriage approached the main gates, Evelyn felt her stomach twist with nervous anticipation. Guards lined the entrance in perfect formation. Massive iron doors opened slowly, revealing courtyards, gardens, and elegant walkways beyond. Everything felt impossibly grand. The carriage rolled forward without stopping. Servants moved efficiently through the palace grounds. Noblemen crossed marble paths. Officers carried documents between buildings. Yet despite all the activity, an unusual tension lingered in the air. People seemed watchful, focused, as though the entire palace had been waiting for something, or someone. Eventually, the carriage came to a halt beneath a covered entrance. The same officer who had escorted her from Frost Hollow opened the door and offered his hand. "Miss Harper," he said respectfully, "please follow me." Evelyn stepped onto polished stone and looked around in awe. The palace was even larger up close. Every surface seemed crafted with extraordinary care. Tall columns supported vaulted ceilings. Intricate carvings decorated the walls. Everywhere she looked, she saw the royal crest, the crown, the silver branches, the 3 stars, the same symbol she had first discovered hidden beneath black fur beside her fireplace. Her pulse quickened. The officer guided her through a series of corridors. Servants paused to watch her pass. Advisors lowered their voices. Several people stared openly before quickly looking away. The attention made Evelyn increasingly uncomfortable. She wanted answers. Instead, every question remained unanswered. At last, they reached a pair of enormous doors made from dark wood. 2 guards standing outside immediately stepped aside. The officer turned toward her. "You may enter." Evelyn blinked. "Alone?" His Majesty requested it. The words echoed through her mind. His Majesty. Suddenly, the air felt thinner. Before she could gather another question, the doors began to open. Slowly, silently, a vast chamber stretched beyond them. Sunlight streamed through towering windows. Silver banners hung between marble pillars. At the far end of the room stood a raised platform with a magnificent throne carved from black stone. Evelyn's heart pounded. Someone sat upon it. She could not clearly see his face at first. The distance was too great, yet something about his presence felt strangely familiar. The doors closed behind her. The sound echoed throughout the chamber. The figure on the throne rose slowly to his feet. Every instinct inside Evelyn seemed to awaken at once. She knew those eyes before she could see them clearly. Silver, calm, intelligent. The same eyes that had watched her beside a fire during a winter storm. The same eyes that had followed her movements through a quiet cabin. The same eyes she had seen looking back at her from the forest before disappearing into the snow. The distance between them suddenly felt meaningless. Understanding crashed over her in a single breathtaking moment. The mysterious wolf, the royal crest, the ring, the journey. Every impossible piece finally connected. And standing before her, dressed in black and silver, was King Rowan Blackthorn himself. Evelyn could only stare. Every question that had followed her from Frost Hollow suddenly had an answer standing before her. King Rowan Blackthorn descended from the throne platform with calm, measured steps. The vast chamber remained silent. No advisors interrupted. No guards moved. It was as though the entire palace understood that this moment belonged to only 2 people. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She remembered the storm, the silver eyes beside the fire, the quiet presence that had filled her small cabin. None of it felt impossible anymore. Somehow, impossibly, the king of the Northern Territories had been the wolf she rescued. Rowan stopped a few feet away. Up close, he looked exactly as she imagined he would. Strong without arrogance, powerful without cruelty. Yet it was his eyes that remained unchanged. The same eyes that had watched her offer kindness when she believed nobody was looking. "Miss Harper," he said softly. The sound of his voice immediately reminded her of the dream she had experienced beside the hearth. Calm, familiar. "Your Majesty," she managed to reply. Rowan's expression warmed slightly. "You sheltered a stranger during a winter storm." Evelyn blinked. I sheltered a wolf. Most people would have closed the door. His gaze never left hers. You did not. The simple words carried unexpected weight. For years, Evelyn had lived as though she barely mattered. Forgotten, overlooked, dismissed. Yet here stood the most powerful man in the kingdom speaking as though her choice had changed everything. Rowan continued forward until only a few feet separated them. You offered warmth when you expected nothing in return. You offered food when you had little to spare. You showed compassion without knowing who I was. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Anyone would have done the same. A faint smile appeared on the king's face. No, they would not. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable silence. Peaceful silence. The kind that felt strangely natural. Rowan reached into his coat and removed something silver. Evelyn immediately recognized it. The matching ring. The twin to the one resting safely in her pocket. The ring you found belonged to my family for generations, he said. When I realized where I had left it, I knew exactly where to search. Evelyn slowly removed the ring she carried and held it out. Rowan looked at it, but made no move to take it. Keep it. She looked up in surprise. Your Majesty? It was given freely. The answer only deepened her confusion. Around them, sunlight poured through the towering windows, filling the chamber with golden light. For the first time since arriving at the palace, Evelyn felt her fear beginning to fade. She saw something unexpected in Rowan's expression. Gratitude. Genuine gratitude. The king turned slightly toward the assembled court watching from the edges of the chamber. His voice carried clearly throughout the hall. Let it be known that Evelyn Harper is an honored guest of this palace. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Rowan continued before anyone could react. Any respect shown to me shall also be shown to her. Evelyn's breath caught. Years of loneliness seemed to crack apart in a single moment. The forgotten Omega from Frost Hollow was no longer invisible. Yet even as warmth filled her chest, she noticed something else. Several distant faces in the crowd exchanged uneasy glances. Not everyone appeared pleased by the king's announcement. Rowan seemed to notice it as well. His expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened slightly. Then he looked back at Evelyn and offered a reassuring smile. Your journey to the palace has ended, he said quietly. But I believe your true story is only beginning.